Hey, guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People story. I decided to hold a garage sale last weekend to get rid of a bunch of old stuff I didn't need anymore. I posted some flyers around the neighborhood and put up signs on the main road to advertise. On Saturday morning, I hauled everything out front and arranged it neatly on some folding tables. I had clothes, books, toys, antiques, and knickknacks galore. Within an hour, cars started pulling up. Folks wandered around, sifted through the piles, and chatted about their finds. I was relieved to see people actually showing interest. As I explained prices and wrapped fragile items, I felt a sense of accomplishment. This garage sale thing wasn't so bad after all. That is, until she arrived. I glanced up from boxing a set of novelty mugs to see a woman strutting up the driveway. Based solely on her entitled expression and haughty posture, I could tell she was trouble. And I was right. "What utter rubbish," the woman declared, wrinkling her nose at my wares. "How do you expect to make any money with this worthless junk?" I bit my tongue, not wanting to cause a scene with other customers around. "Well, I think everything is appropriately priced," I said evenly. "Plus, one person's trash is another's treasure, right?" The woman scoffed. "Obviously, you need my help staging this disaster." Before I could object, she snatched the price tags off the merchandise and started hiking everything up by 500%. Nice blouses that were $5 now had $30 stickers. Old paperbacks listed at 50 cents were suddenly $5. My grandma's antique spoon collection went from $20 to a whopping $150. "Hey, wait just a minute," I protested, hurrying after her. "You can't just reprice my stuff without permission. You clearly don't understand how to value these items or how to run a sale," she said condescendingly. "Luckily for you, I'm an expert on maximizing profits. You're welcome." I stood there, stunned at her sheer audacity. By now a line was forming, and I didn't want to hold up the other customers. So I let her continue, figuring I would sort it out once she left. But she didn't leave. The woman, who I'd nicknamed Karen in my head, planted herself behind the cash box and took over managing the entire garage sale. She barked orders at browsers, berating them if they tried to haggle over prices. She scrutinized every purchase, accusing people of shoplifting if she didn't think they'd paid enough. All the while, she never broke for so much as a sip of water, intent on monitoring the cash at all times. I kept politely asking her to leave, but Karen completely ignored me. After an hour of this, I'd had enough. I marched right up to her and said firmly, "Ma'am, this is my property and my garage sale. I'm going to have to ask you to leave now." Karen let out an exasperated sigh. "How many times do I need to explain this?" she said slowly, as if speaking to a child. "You clearly need my help to run this sale properly and make any decent money." My frustration mounted, but I stayed calm. "I understand, but I didn't actually ask for your help. So please gather your things and go." Karen's nostrils flared indignantly. "How dare you?" she sputtered. "After all I've done to improve this disaster, the only reason you've made any profits is because of me." Realizing civil conversation wasn't getting through to her, I decided to take a tougher stance. "Ma'am, you are trespassing on my private property," I said sternly. "I am asking you to leave immediately, or I will be forced to call the police." That seemed to give Karen pause. Looking around, she realized we'd attracted quite a crowd of spectators. With a huff, she grabbed her designer handbag and stormed off toward the street. "This isn't over," Karen yelled over her shoulder. "I'll be back for my rightful share of the profits." I shook my head in disbelief. The nerve of that woman. I turned to address the onlookers. "Show's over, folks," I announced. "Please feel free to keep shopping. Everything is returned to the original low prices." For the remainder of the day, I kept an eagle eye out for any sign of Karen's return. Thankfully, she didn't come back. Given her threats, though, I took precautions. I made sure witnesses were present as I counted the earnings and documented the total $185 in photography. I even drove to the police station and filed a report about the earlier incident. An officer offered to patrol by my house periodically to deter any further harassment. The following week, I received a furious phone call from none other than Karen. She demanded I hand over $550, insisting she was owed the bulk of the profits. "That money rightfully belongs to me," Karen shouted. "I'm the reason your pathetic little garage sale made any money at all." Remaining calm, I made it clear I would not be paying her a single cent. I warned that if she attempted to come onto my property again, I would file for a restraining order. "This is absurd," Karen sputtered. "I'll see you in court, you ungrateful swindler." The call left me feeling rattled. I decided to follow through and filed for a restraining order first thing Monday morning. I submitted the documentation and photos proving Karen was never authorized to be on my property or handle sales. The local police contacted Karen, warning she would face arrest if she violated the order. I also received a court summons as she attempted to bring a civil lawsuit against me. However, once I presented my evidence and account of events, the judge dismissed the case outright. Karen left the courthouse muttering furiously under her breath. I walked out with a profound sense of relief, glad to close the book on that mess. The officer commended me on remaining level-headed throughout the ordeal, and I realized that while there may be Karens popping up here and there, keeping your cool and standing your ground matters most. Don't let anyone trespass upon your rights, whether that's your private property, principles, or personal pride. The next one is a pro-revenge story. This story happened about 15 years ago, give or take. At the time, I worked for a small industrial railroad in my city that served about 20 different industries along the docks. To get to the docks, from the yard where I would pick up the inbound deliveries to the industry's cars, we had a mile of street trackage that ran right down the middle of a small street. Numerous bars lined the street on one side, with the river on the other side. Because of city regulations, we were only allowed to operate along that span of track between specific hours, typically 11 at night to about 5 in the morning. However, since the bars were open at that time, it also meant that we had to trundle along at a crawl, usually walking pace or just about that, and keep the locomotive on the front end of the movement. Every night I went down that street, there would typically be 2 or 3 people who had parked too close to the tracks, prompting me to have to get people to move their cars. It wasn't a major problem, just an annoyance. Except for one guy. It seemed that every single night I would have to stop about halfway down, because this guy would always park his truck at an angle in the street, as opposed to parallel parking. There were some angle parking spaces, but they were further down where there weren't rails in the road. Every single night I'd have to head into the bar this guy owned and bug the guy to get him to move the truck. Most of the time it'd take him a good 30 minutes to an hour to drag himself out and move the thing. This meant, of course, I was losing time that I needed to get my job done. After months of this, I finally decided that I had enough. So I decided to have the guy towed. Yeah, that didn't work out as well as I hoped. Turned out that the guy also had some job with the city, or the mayor's office, or some friend in either, so no one would dare come out and tow his truck. I think I waited there a good hour before he eventually came out and moved it, even having the gall to flip me the bird as he left. At that point, I decided that not only was I totally done with the guy, but if the chance arose, I was going to teach him a lesson he wouldn't soon forget. Nothing physical per se, just a hard-learned lesson. A couple of days later, I found myself heading down the track with half a dozen heavy cars with machinery bound for the docks. As I rounded the curve and neared the place where that guy always parked, I gently applied the independent brakes on the locomotive. This would slow the heavy train, but wasn't enough to stop it outright. At least, not quickly. I waited until the very last minute, laying on the horn and applying the full brakes, bringing everything to a screeching halt in the middle of the street. As I felt the brakes begin to hold, there was this loud thunk and screeching and tearing of metal as the train simply punted the truck out of the way, tearing the bed clean off it in the process. This did not go unnoticed, as a crowd had started to gather out front of the bar when they heard the train coming. I stayed in the cab, calling back to dispatch and informing them that I'd struck a parked car and they needed to get the police and a tow truck out to my location. All the while I could hear this guy screaming, heard him over the sound of the locomotive no less, at the top of his lungs about how he was going to have me thrown in jail, sue the company, and all manner of things. Locking the doors, I opted to just wait in the cab for the boys in blue to arrive. Eventually, they popped around and started taking statements. I explained the problem, noting that I couldn't, well, I could have, but it wouldn't have been a good idea, simply slam on the brakes due to the cargo I was carrying, and that the only reason I hit the truck was because it was improperly parked. I added that the gentleman had been warned in the past that something like this could happen, and had ignored the warnings. The man, for his part, was simply livid. hopping around, yelling at me, yelling at the cops, and just beside himself. In the end, he was ticketed for his bad parking, obstructing the passage of a train, and his truck was totaled, and he ended up on the hook for paying for it. The truck was brand new and not yet paid off, or so I was told. It took about 2 hours to clean up the mess, and I was, per company rules, suspended for a week during the company investigation, but honestly, it was worth it. Didn't have any problems with him from that point forward either. The next one is a petty revenge story. So I get on my flight yesterday for a short 1 hour and 20-minute flight. Start chatting up the dude I'm next to, and he's very loud, but extremely nice. I quickly figure out he's a disabled combat vet. Thank him for his sacrifice. He got teary-eyed me too, maybe. He was in the first Gulf War. His neck was messed up and his life is on disability now. All the while I'm getting this info, Karen is in the seat in front of me with earbuds in. She keeps looking over her shoulder and trying to shove her earbuds in further. She's clearly getting physically frustrated, and every time my new buddy talks again, she has to do it all over again. Now, normally I might talk less to a loud child or a loud drunk, etc., but this guy is telling me his life story, and he's also a big sports fan, Packers for those that care, and I'm a big sports fan, Seahawks, so we have a lot to talk about. He's obviously lonely, wife divorced him after the accident, doesn't hear from the kids much, etc. You guessed it, Karen has taken to leaning forward in her seat, continues to look over her shoulder, and at this point she's probably suffered brain damage from shoving those earbuds in. I'm ready for a nap, but fuck Karen and her attitude. Pretty sure everyone else has figured out he's disabled, and I'm getting genuine smiles from everyone else around. So I just keep making small talk about politics, he knows a lot, and sports and weather and my work in Alaska, which fascinates the crap out of him. Best part is, each time we have stretches of silence, I'm the one restarting the convo, and Karen keeps side-glancing me, clearly having stomach troubles as she rocks forward again, wincing as she pushes the cursed earbuds closer together. He was awesome and deserves mad respect for his sacrifice. If his kids read this, please reach out to him. He lives in Seattle and his kids all live in Wisconsin. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Many years ago, in a previous life, I was an investigator in a robbery/homicide/vice section of the organization. I had a partner, Karen, whom I worked well with for the preceding year. I had been warned about her backstabbing behavior in other sections, but I foolishly ignored it. Leading up to the incident, she had been assigned 3 child exploitation cases that all she had to do was confirm the facts of the case, and she would have probable cause to obtain warrants. In spite of my reminders to perform the tasks, she waited until the 11th hour, and then went on vacation without having completed the tasks. So I did it for her. She could now go to a judge without further action. When she returned, she was livid and accused me of stealing her work. I said if she had done that for me, I would have bought her lunch. From that point on, our professional relationship deteriorated, and I recalled the warnings I was given about Karen that mirrored my experience. A couple of months later, our idiot supervisor mistakenly assigned Karen and I the same case. I made contact with members of the task force and spoke with the officer who originated the case. Karen overheard my last conversation and blew her stack, saying words to the affect of, "You're stealing my work again! I was assigned that case! You're trying to make me look bad!" I calmly explained that the idiot supervisor assigned me the case, and I showed her the paperwork. She would have none of that, though. I offered to buy her breakfast and talk it out, but she told me to F off and added, "You do not do anything on my case without my permission, do you understand?" So, I relinquished the case. For the next month, Karen tried to throw me under the bus for anything and everything, going into the idiot supervisor's office and complaining about me. I'd get called into the idiot supervisor's office for a 16-minute coffee break or other such nonsense. Well, a triple homicide case came down the pipe, and she wanted it bad, schmoozing the idiot supervisor to give her the case. Rather than ask me personally, she had the idiot supervisor approach me to do the forensics portion. I told him that I was told not to do anything on her case without her permission, and I didn't want to get in trouble or upset her, so I was going to need permission for everything in writing before I did it. I needed permission to pack the forensic kit. Exactly how many paper bags, plastic bags, etc., how many markers, how many swabs. I would need her written permission to enter the crime scene. How many entry photos? What distance? How would I collect each piece of evidence? How would I label them? I told the idiot supervisor to make sure she understood that because I was not to do anything on her case without her permission. He scurried off and then returned a short time later and told me that she didn't want the case and that it was mine. The next one is an entitled people story. Well, I should have known that no good deed goes unpunished. We have a small vegetable and herb garden in the corner of our yard. Two neighbors have the ability and my permission to reach over the fence and snip off any herbs they need. We always grow much more than we can use. One neighbor has been doing it for years with no problems. He takes a sprig or two a few times a week and always asks if he needs more than usual. He repays me with beautiful roses, but I would have no problem with not getting them in return. The other neighbor never cooked, so he never took any. Now he has a new girlfriend and she happened to introduce herself while I was planting the herbs, so I offered her some once it has a chance to grow a bit. So, of course, 2 weeks after I planted, she snips off all but a few leaves off of every herb. 2 weeks. I was livid. My boyfriend went over and explained that it was too soon, the plants were tiny, not ready, etc. He's much nicer than I am. The neighbor apologized profusely and said the girlfriend wouldn't be going anywhere near the herbs until I specifically allow it. A week later, I catch this dumbass out there with a pair of scissors, but it's only been a week and there's nothing to snip out there yet. Apparently, she can't make meatballs without parsley, and the grocery store within walking distance is too far to go. One of my plants has 3 leaves on it. Seriously. The other neighbor doesn't dare take anything before mid-July. Certainly he would never touch anything before I did. We looked at each other for a few seconds, and then I just said, "Please get your herbs at the store from now on." I can't believe I managed to think of that. Usually I think of a great comeback 10 minutes after the fact. She turned bright red and went in the house. Hopefully she embarrassed herself enough to stay away. I don't want to have problems with this neighbor. He's nice and quiet and doesn't bother anyone. Tomorrow it will be a week since I caught her again. We'll see what happens. The next one is an entitled parent story. I, 32F, was in a major car accident in January of 2021. Ironically, I had been taking my boyfriend, 36M, to the ER because he had bleeding ulcers and ended up getting admitted to the hospital that night. This was still when they were enforcing COVID rules, so I was booted out of the hospital at about 0300 in the morning. When I left, it was snowing, and not thinking, I hopped on the freeway, which wasn't a good idea. I had been driving a lifted Jeep Cherokee with mud terrain tires, not the best choice for snowstorm driving. Getting off the freeway to go home, my brakes locked up, and I went into a light pole head first at about 60 miles per hour. My Jeep did not have airbags. That was dumb. Needless to say, my car was totaled, and I had to be extracted from the car by the fire department. This whole time I'd been blacking out and losing consciousness, and I still get random flashes of it. I don't have all my memories from that night, or several months after the accident. I got sent to the nearest trauma center, which was the same hospital I had just left. The nurses felt pretty bad about kicking me out. I ended up with a moderate to severe TBI, a broken bone under my left eye, hairline fractures on my skull on the left side, bruising behind my ears, and black eyes. I had also cut open the inside of my mouth, had multiple lacerations all over my face. I broke my driver's side window with my face, broke and bruised some ribs, had hairline fractures in my spine, broke my right wrist, my right knee, and my left foot, which required 2 surgeries, and I still need approximately 3 more. Needless to say, I was not doing great. I had recently gotten divorced the previous year and think that my entitled parents decided that my accident was my boyfriend's fault. I had to stay in the hospital for a total of 12 days, during which the mild family drama exploded into a severe family inferno. As I got closer to being released, all I had wanted to do was go home to my boyfriend and our kids. He had 2 previously, and I had 1. My entitled mother decided that wasn't what she wanted. On the phone, we sound almost identical. The whole time that I was in the hospital, she had been getting on the phone and impersonating me to my apartment complex management, even going as far as calling the cops to get my boyfriend and his 2 kids removed from my apartment. They were not on my lease yet. My entitled mom also forged my signature on hospital paperwork and made up a story about how my boyfriend was abusive to me, getting him banned from seeing me at the hospital. Again, forging my signature and writing a letter stating I didn't want to see him. This whole time I was still suffering from the effects of my TBI and was delirious from the combination of pain medications and brain fog from my head injury. Entitled Mom even had the locks changed on my apartment without my consent. When I finally was released from the hospital, I was in a wheelchair because of my broken foot that had just had 2 plates and 10 screws surgically put in to hold it together, and an ankle-to-hip brace on my other leg from my knee being broken. I requested to go home to my apartment, but again Entitled Mom played it that I couldn't go home because I had a second-story apartment and couldn't take care of myself. So I got sent to stay at my parents' house, against my will, an hour away from home because Entitled Mom wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to let my boyfriend come back to my apartment. I spent almost a whole miserable month there. Entitled Mom refused to take me home even after I got crutches and was able to bear some weight. Initially, they refused even to go get my crutches from town because they didn't want me to have more mobility. Eventually, it got to the point where I had a friend come and pick me up from EM's house so I could go home because they kept refusing to let me go. As I gained clarity in my mind and was taken off the intense pain medication, I was able to start rectifying the situations that Entitled Mom made a huge mess of in my life. But I'm still trying to recover in some areas. I didn't find out until much later when medical bills started coming in that Entitled Mom had called my boyfriend's health insurance company, impersonating me, and had me removed from his insurance. It took months of calling and badgering and footwork on my part to get the situation figured out and have the insurance pay for what they were supposed to pay for. It almost caused me to go bankrupt. At the same time, Entitled Mom signed me up for minimal health insurance coverage through the state that I had no idea I was enrolled in, until I got a bill later stating that I back owed fees. Needless to say, I eventually completely cut both Entitled Mom and my father out of my life, after finding out how much they tried to control and how much they messed my life up. I ended up getting protection orders after they tried to break into my house, stalked me, and sent family and friends over to harass me. This whole incident was the straw that broke the camel's back. There was quite a bit of retaliation on their side that threw my life into a total tailspin ever since. But I'm sticking to my guns and not backing down. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.